But my beats, they are hard.
Another what I'd like to call Coach's Corner. Get an opportunity to talk with Florida A&M head coach Willie Simmons, preparing to go into his third season, and it's been a great 2 seasons thus far for Rattler Nation. Every year has been better than the previous one, and so that just means the excitement is ramped up in Tallahassee, across the MEAC, and just the black college football landscape in general. And what has really got folks excited is the most recent 2020 recruiting class for the Rattlers, the defending BCSN Black College National Champions. Let's not forget that. And so joining me on the line, Coach Simmons, I appreciate you taking time to talk about the class, and you are days away from the start of spring. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing well. A pleasure to be on.
So before we start talking about the young men that have decided to come to Florida A&M and play in your program, what's the last 3 months been for you in 2020? What's it been like going from the award season to the recruiting season to the little bit of break maybe that you had before the start of spring?
Well, I think you pretty much said it. It's been nonstop. And as many know, football's a 365-day profession now. We rarely as players or coaches get much downtime. So as soon as the season ended back in late November, we went right into recruiting mode, and obviously had to hit the road throughout this great state of Florida, trying to identify prospective student-athletes who wanted to call Florida A&M their home. And we were fortunate to sign some really good young men to bring to the program, but it's been a whirlwind and a lot of long trips. We don't have the luxury to get on planes and fly, like some of the larger programs. So we get in our cars or rental cars and drive, but been really productive and juggling all of that. Also expecting a baby here in the next few days or weeks, depending on what the doctors say tomorrow. On top of that, has definitely made the last 3 months for me pretty nonstop, a pretty good whirlwind.
Right. And so have you had it doesn't sound like you have. So I don't know. I was going to ask, when is there a moment to sort of reflect, but it keeps going. You just go from, you're one group of guys that you're saying thank you to for all that they've contributed. You've got the young guys that are carrying over. You got things in your family that you're anxious about. And so it just sounds like it just keeps going. Who's there to help you keep you sort of level-headed or just really when you need to kind of breathe and pause? Who's there to help you?
Well, Mr. Sandman is my helper.
Okay.
I try to get ample rest, but I tell you what, I have a great support system. Obviously, I grew up here in this community, so my family's here. Unfortunately, we lost both of my parents at an early age, but my grandmother's still here. We still go to her house every Sunday. My sisters are here, relatives, family members, friends. So I have a pretty good support system. So it keeps me from getting overwhelmed with the responsibilities that I have. But, we all know that comes with the territory. If you decide to be a head coach at a program like Florida A&M, it's going to come with a lot of pressure if you're allowed to be that. A lot of responsibility, but very rewarding. And when I see these young men graduate, we had 13 guys walk across the stage, in December, that's when it makes it worthwhile. And so I never complain about the load that's put on me because I do get to see the impact that we have every day on these young men that we get to coach.
Do you know, obviously whenever coaches, I think, take over new programs or move into new situations, I'm sure they have short-term, long-term goals. If you can allow yourself to think about before or as you took this position and you're 2 years in now, do you feel like you're on pace or on track with where you want it to be, or do you feel like maybe you've exceeded some of the expectations that you had set for yourself if you think back to 2 years ago, I should say?
That's a very good question. The primary goal that I set for myself and carried over into this program is to bring FAMU back to, what we feel is its rightful place at the pinnacle of FCS football. I grew up around this program. I know all about its history. I know all about the tradition, and I know all about the tough times that have fallen upon us. And so, I was brought in with the charge of revitalizing fan base, bringing a lot of pride and passion back to this program. And I feel like I've done that. As far as the wins, the championships, that's a year-to-year challenge. Every year we're going to set goals to be competitive in our conference, win Black College National Championships, really create a winning culture. That's my primary goal. But I think we've done a pretty good job of bringing excitement back. Now it's just a matter of finding a way to sustain that, and that's a daily challenge. I don't think you ever reach that goal because sustainability is ongoing.
Right. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about this recruiting class, the 2020 recruiting class, and it should be noted for people who maybe missed this. A couple of publications ranked FAMU either number one, Box to Row ranked FAMU recruiting class the number one in Black college football. Hero Sports ranked FAMU number 10 overall in all of FCS football. That's number 10 in the country overall among all 120-something FCS programs. So obviously there's a lot of excitement. There are, by my count, there are 18 players that would sort of fit into this class. 3 of them already had pre-enrolled prior to signing day. And feel free to jump in if I get any numbers wrong here, Coach. I'm just going off with my little bit of research, but you would know better than me. So let's start by talking about the 3 young men who I guess we call them the early signees, or the early enrollees. These are young men who kind of came in back in January. They already signed up for classes, so they are already taking classes, and they will be participating in spring practice. And I'm speaking specifically quarterback John Holcombe II, defensive lineman Donald Hull, and offensive lineman Orlando Heggs II. All 3 of them are participating in spring practices, correct, Coach?
Yes, sir. So all 3 of those guys were early enrollees. John was a 4-year transfer, came to us from Kansas State, where he spent 2 years there as a quarterback, 6'4", 240-pound guy, very athletic. Has all the tools to be a really, really good football player. And we were fortunate enough to grab John, had a prior relationship with his family, being that we coached his older brother, Zarian, over at Prairie View A&M. He's here going through workouts, class. Orlando Heggs is another 4-year transfer from Wake Forest, played at Bowles High School, the Bowles School down in Jacksonville, and definitely want to give our condolences to the Bowles family. The legendary coach, Corky Rogers, passed away today, so definitely want to keep the Bowles family in our prayers. We have 3 young men on our team that played at Bowles. But again, he came here from Wake Forest, where he was there for 2 years. He also has 3 years left to play. And then Donald Hall is a young man who started his college career at Prairie View A&M, came in the year after I left, spent a year there, transferred to Mississippi Gulf Coast, where they went undefeated, won the Junior College National Championship this year, and we were able to get him here as well. He's a 6'3", 320-pound defensive tackle. So very excited about all of those guys. John and Orlando both have 3 years left to play. Donald has 2 years of eligibility with the redshirt year if he needs it. So I'm very excited about those guys. They've been working extremely hard, and we're looking forward to seeing what they can do once we start practice in 2 days.
Yeah, so I had the pleasure of speaking with John Holcombe's quarterback coach, J.P. Tillman, out of Houston. A great conversation and a podcast. For anybody who's listening, I recommend you go back. I mean, it was a great 2-hour conversation I had with J.P. Just about life and just being the quarterback. And, I mean, just stuff I'm sure you can relate to, being you've gone through it as a former college quarterback as well. But, I mean, for John to find his way to FAMU, there was a previous relationship, obviously, there. That helped. Give us an idea about the timeline or the process or whatever you can share from the moment that you knew there was interest to the possibility to him actually making the decision to come. What does that timeline look like?
Oh, well, the funny thing, when John entered the portal, which I think was actually during football season, obviously a lot of people started inquiring about him. You know, we knew about John being that, again, we coached his older brother. He's from Houston, you know, so he attended a lot of football camps, was a 3-star dual-threat quarterback coming out of high school. So there's a lot of interest from a lot of programs. And so the first, once we started reaching out to people that knew John and knew what his intentions were, he wanted to be a 4-4 transfer, which obviously means going from Kansas State to another Power 5 institution. So we really didn't do much in the recruiting process early on. Near mid to late December was when he still hadn't signed, and of course Coach KJ Black, who I hired as my quarterback's coach this year, had coached his older brother Zarian the year before. We kind of just talked one night, and I just inquired about him. You know, hey, what's the latest with John? And he said he'd reach out. So he reached out to the quarterback guru who's been working with him, and I just sent John a message, just kind of checking in with him, seeing how he was doing, and he immediately responded. So we started a dialogue. Coach Black had a great conversation with his dad. I sent him some of Ryan's stats from the past season, which really piqued his interest, and from that point, it really happened pretty quickly. I mean, it was about a 48-hour turnaround from that point. So really slow in the beginning, probably a month period between him declaring entering the transfer portal and us reaching out, but about 3 or 4 days from that second contact to him being on campus. So it all happened pretty quickly, which we're very excited about. But it was one of those weird recruiting stories that doesn't take your traditional path as far as contacting a prospective student athlete.
Right, and so the expectation as spring practices are starting is that the competition is open. Obviously, there were a number of quarterbacks behind Ryan Stanley this past year, including Rashawn McKay, who stepped in and won a couple of big games for us this past season. So it's expected that there will be a healthy competition for the position in the spring. Would you? I hate to ask this question, but I'm going to ask it. Would you like to be able to name a starter by the end of spring, or do you just kind of play that out and see what happens, or just maybe even just wait until the fall before you make something like that known?
Well, I think if you name a starter or at least know who your starter is going to be, that means that guy's had a phenomenal spring. I really anticipate a very, very intense quarterback competition this spring. As you alluded to, Rashawn McKay, the young man who played some big games for us last season, came in the A&T game after Ryan went down and won the game in overtime, played the entire game versus Morgan State on the road, won that game, finished the season with a very good touchdown-interception ratio, completed over 70% of his passes. So he's shown that he's more than capable of leading his football team. Obviously, John Holcombe comes in with a lot of fanfare, a lot of physical tools and attributes that you would look for in a quarterback. But we also have 2 other young men. Cameron Sapp's a young man we signed in last year's class, who's a very athletic young man, 6'2", 205 pounds, true dual threat guy. And LaJohn Howard's the quarterback we signed in our first class out of New Orleans, who has a big-time arm, and has really worked hard to build his body up and is throwing the football extremely well, really digesting the offense going into his 3rd year in the system. So I mean, this is probably going to be the most intense quarterback battle that I think I've been a part of in a very long time. And if I was a betting man, I would say that it wouldn't be solidified by the end of 15 practices. It'll probably roll over into training camp. But, again, we're going to see what happens. And if someone separates themselves that much to show that they're the unquestioned leader of this team, we'll go in that direction. If it's not settled, obviously we'll go into training camp, giving those guys a couple more weeks to battle it out before we have to name a starter that first game against Albany State down in Miami.
Right. Okay. Well, I thought I'd give you that question, get it out the way, because I know that's going to be a question you're going to get a lot, I'm sure, in the next couple of weeks or months or maybe all summer. So I got to hear first things. That way you're good and prepped for it as it comes, I'm sure. So moving over to Orlando Heggs, he's actually now the second, I would say the second highly rated offensive lineman who's coming to the program. Last year, Calvin Ashley came in, and I believe he was a 5-star rated player who transferred in before the start of last season. And you have Heggs coming in this year. He's a 3-star guy, highly thought of, coming out of Wake Forest. As it relates to offensive linemen, what kind of things do you and offensive line coach Alex Jackson talk about in terms of building that synergy among the group, that offensive line group, which makes offensive line groups great?
Well, I think the biggest thing, we've been very fortunate, first and foremost, those two guys that you mentioned, along with Keenan Forbes. Keenan Forbes, who was a All-American guy for us, first-team All-Conference performer for us last season, was also a 4-year transfer, came to us from Washington State. He's from down in Miami. So we've been very blessed to have 3 offensive linemen, all that come from the state of Florida, who all went off to play Power 5 football, who found their way, to Florida A&M through the transfer portal. And that's always a big part of any program, being solid on the offensive and defensive lines, and that's been an emphasis for us since we got here. But the biggest thing we look for, we look for guys that just have a certain skill set, a certain, tenacity about themselves. And, we want to be a physical football team. We didn't run the ball extremely well last season, but it's been something that we tried to hang our hat on since we've been together, Coach Jackson and myself. So all of those guys have shown that they're aggressive guys. They're all big guys, over 300-pounders, pretty athletic for their size. And that's always a plus. Whenever you can find big guys who can move, that's what you look for. And they're all strong and explosive. And we're an offense that majors in zone schemes and gap schemes, and which means a lot of double teaming. And we want to make sure we got guys that can create movement up front and also protect the quarterback. And all 3 of those guys have shown the ability, at least from their high school and 4-year film, to be able to do so. And obviously Keenan Forbes has done it at a high level here as a starter, and Calvin Ashley, during his limited time last year, showed that he has the ability to do so as well. And we're hoping that Orlando Heggs can do the same thing coming in from Wake Forest.
And moving over to Donald Hall on the defensive line, he obviously from out of Mississippi Gulf Coast Community College. What was it that let me ask, I guess, about in terms of junior colleges, because if I'm not mistaken, there are only maybe a couple of guys out of this entire group who came out of the junior college level. Is that a route that is a sort of a need or a specific need that you look for, or do you just kind of keep an open mind about junior college players along with high school players as well?
We try to be more need-based when it comes to junior college transfers. Typically, the thing about junior college guys is with the new rules that require them to graduate, oftentimes they come as juniors, or maybe every now and then a guy that has 3 years left, with the red shirt. But typically they're a little bit older, and so they're not going to be in the program as long as obviously a high school signee, or in the case of John Holcombe and Orlando Heggs and Calvin Ashley, guys who have 3 years left to play. And so we try to be very strategic, when we take junior college transfers. If we have a glaring need, a guy looking for a guy that can come in and maybe compete right away for a starting spot, that's where we typically look. So with Donald Hall's case, we obviously lost 5 defensive linemen from last year's class, from last year's team, and we wanted to replenish that group as quickly as possible. And he was the lone junior college signee from this class, but he's a young man that's in school now that we feel can come in and, again, compete for a starting job right away. So he was one of the few guys from the junior college ranks that we identified early on, and being that we had a prior relationship with Coach Black being at Prairie View during his freshman year, all of our background checks came out, to show that he was a good young man.
And so for those guys, what if as you talk to those guys, as they get used to life, as a Rattler and in Tallahassee, is there anything that you can think of that they maybe share with you that they have sort of enjoyed about making the move to FAMU, or just the culture and the environment? Anything that kind of just comes to mind? I was just kind of curious.
I think the culture, one thing that many of them have talked about, especially during their visit, even the high school guys, is just the family environment, the true family that we try to build here and cultivate here at Florida A&M. So when these guys come on visits and they spend time with our players, and they walk around campus and meet professors and people that work here, they feel that sense of family, and it gives them a sense of welcome. And that's what we want to convey. That's what we want to make sure that we present every time we bring a young man, prospective student athlete, and his family to our campus. And so that's been the one probably reoccurring theme that the guys that are currently here, the guys that are coming this summer in this signing class, that they've all made mention of, and their parents as well, is how much of a family it is here. And that makes me feel good, because, again, that's a staple of this program. It's obviously one of our 7 F's, and we want to make sure that we continue to portray that and make them feel that when they come here.
Yes, sir. I would definitely know that is a real thing, and it's just one of those things. I think all of us, alums, anyone who's been there or knows Florida A&M, that's what we're constantly telling young people. So that's good to hear that. Not that I didn't expect that to still exist, but it's always good to hear that message continues to be pressed or talked about to these young guys. So let's get into the young guys who are coming in, the high school, or I guess we'll call the summer or the fall group of guys, the other 15 players. And I guess the biggest thing that I'll first talk about, there are 2 different groups, I think, which are highly rated and thought of, and that's the defensive back group and then the remaining offensive line group. So I will start with the defensive backs because what I noticed, all 4 of the young men come in with 4-star ratings. All of them have had success at the high school level. All of them have had great a great pedigree, so to speak, in coming to Florida A&M. So let's start with Trey Bishop. 6'3", 210 pounds, from out of Dawson, Georgia. He started at University of Georgia with Kirby Smart, then transferred to Navarro College, and then that's how he found his way to FAMU, choosing FAMU over TCU and Texas State. What was, 6'3" as a defensive back sounds great. What was it that you saw from Trey, and how did Trey find his way to FAMU?
Well, to say what we saw in Trey, I think it'd be safe to say if you turn this film on, you'd only need to watch it for about 2 clips to see what we saw in Trey. He's 6'3", he's 217 pounds. Marquise Bell was a 4-star safety that we brought in last year, similar situation. And I just remember walking into the restaurant the first night he was here, and Marquise was his host, and they were both standing there. And he made Marquise look small. Marquise is 6'3", he's 210 pounds, but Trey made him look small. So just how physically imposing he is, how athletic he is, was a high school quarterback, very athletic guy, U.S. Army All-American. So again, all of the accolades speak for themselves when it comes to Trey from a football perspective. He's a South Georgia guy, and so obviously we try to do a really good job of identifying guys from that, if they're outside of the state of Florida, that are close enough that still have FAMU ties. So he's just north of Albany, which is about an hour-and-a-half drive from here. His family, he has some Rattlers that are close to his family. And so we really did, we reached out to all of those people, and we really just, kept plugging away. And he went through the recruiting process all the way down to the last minute. He told us basically on signing day that he was coming. And I think he wanted to get closer to home. He transferred out to Navarro, which is out in Texas. And so obviously TCU and Texas State are both out that way. But he wanted to get closer. And so I think the draw here and the fact that we have Marquise Bell, who was a first-team all-conference guy, and just to sell the imagine having two guys at an FCS program like FAMU who were four-star recruits, All-Americans come out of high school, both 6'3" guys, prototypical size guys, and in the secondary. Just think about the publicity that we can get. And I think that's something that really interests him in the end, just really being able to brand himself, he and Marquise together as a pretty intimidating secondary safety combination, so to speak. And I think all those things mixed with the fact that we were an hour and a half away from his hometown really tipped the scale for us in the recruiting process.
Who's your recruiting coordinator, Coach, that helps pair up groups like that? Because I can imagine, like I said, you have a guy like Trey Bishop coming in. Oh, let's immediately pair him up with Marquise Bell, and that relationship, if it goes great, then I mean those guys, kick it off, and it just it'll do what it's going to do later on.
Well, Ryan Smith is our recruiting coordinator, so he typically sets up the visits and pairs guys together. So we have conversations as a staff about who would be a good fit. The one thing you want to do when you look at player hosts is you want to pair guys with like-minded guys. Some of these recruits are pretty laid-back guys. They don't really like to party or hang out. They may just want to come here and go to a movie. And so you may want to pair him with that guy that's a homebody. You don't want to pair him with the party animal. And he don't want to go anywhere. He may being on family. Well, you may have a guy that is really into the social scene, who really likes to get out and have a good time. Well, you don't want to pair him with the homebody, somebody that's going to sit there and play video games with them. And so you just, knowing our players, and I think that's a big part of recruiting is our coaches really knowing the guys that they recruit. And so we can pair them with the right guys. And fortunately for us, we don't lose many. When we get them on campus, we pair them up with guys as player hosts. I really commend our players. They do a phenomenal job of hosting these guys, really showing them everything that FAMU has to offer. And many of them leave here feeling like this is where they need to be. And that's really what you want from players. And we put a big emphasis on recruiting and tell our players how important it is for them to really do a great job when they host these young men.
Right. Okay. Well, just like I said, I just want, before we got too far down the road, I definitely give, I wanted to make sure, we gave Coach Smith a shout out and all the coaches who did a great job in bringing in these young men. Secondly, Benjamin, I hope I'm saying this name right, Benjamin Onwuzo. Did I say that correct?
That's right. Good job.
Okay. Benjamin Onwuzo, defensive back, 5'11", from Chaminade Prep in Hollywood, Florida. Actually was ranked number two overall by Hero Sports among all of the FCS recruits. 3-time state champion at Chaminade Madonna. He chose FAMU over quite a few Big Ten, SEC. I mean, there were some big names on the list here: Minnesota, Kentucky, Missouri, Indiana, Boston College, Syracuse. What's the? I mean, that probably another situation where you turn on the film. There's you see it, but tell us about Benjamin and what attracted him, or you to him and him to FAMU.
Well, again, it goes back to Coach Smith. I give him all the credit for Benjamin. One thing that I guess I can say FAMU hadn't done a great job in the past was really recruiting I guess you can call them the private schools down in the Palm Beach area, the Chaminade Preps, the St. Thomas Aquinas', the university schools, those schools they're not, predominantly black schools. We spent a lot of time in Northwestern and Central and, Deerfield Beach and those places where, there's a lot of Rattlers in the schools that can talk to these young men. And all. Well, there ain't many Rattlers in Chaminade Madonna Prep, right, as far as teachers. But, Coach Smith went there, has gone there a few times, has really built a great relationship with their head coach. And really just stayed on top of Ben. Ben's a guy that early in the process, he committed to Minnesota during football season, and so was committed to them the entire time. A lot of other schools fell off, didn't recruit them, didn't stay in contact with them, but Coach Smith is just one of those coaches that every time you look around, he's got one of those guys on FaceTime. He's DMing with them back and forth. He's retweeting the stuff that they're saying. So he's really engaged in the recruiting process. And for these young guys, that means a lot. So when things didn't go the way that he wanted them to with Minnesota, then a lot of these schools that had fallen off start trying to come back in, and we kind of relay recruiting to Dayton a lot of times. Well, you want this young lady, and if you ain't calling her, you can't just come back in,
right,
months later and say, hey, yeah, exactly. And so a lot of these schools that came in late, they were behind the 8 ball because we had been recruiting Ben the entire time, had been in contact with them. And so, his mom she felt really comfortable with us. They're an African family. She hadn't really, seen a whole lot of things. I mean, doesn't really trust a lot of this process. And so she just felt comfortable with the group that's been there the whole time, that's been able to answer those questions for her, and we're able to get them on campus. They really enjoyed themselves. And we feel like we got a steal. We really feel like Ben's one of the steals of this class, a guy that could have very well been in the Big Ten or even the ACC or SEC. But he's coming to FAMU, versatile defensive back that can play all 3 positions. And, we're excited about him coming here. We think he's got a chance to be one of the special ones.
And I got to imagine if they saw some of the weather conditions in some of those games that Minnesota played in late November and saw the weather conditions at the Florida Classic or any of the games we played in late November, I got to believe that was a little bit of a selling point. Like, hey, you can go to Minnesota and be in that cold if you want. But, yeah, that's my personal thing. That's my personal thought there. I just got to believe that might have helped just a hair. Well, that's good to hear. And it's funny that you mentioned that connection of going down to a lot of the prep schools. I've always heard from Rattler Nation, or I always hear and see things from Rattler Nation about why we didn't give an offer to this guy, and why just because he's down there, his mother or father, he's got an uncle that went to FAMU. Our connections are so deep with FAMU. It's good to hear that even though we may not have a direct tie-in to a school, that you and your staff made the effort to go out. I'm sure there's a lot of Rattlers listening that definitely appreciate that and love hearing that.
Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, and Rattler Nation did a great job of helping us during this recruiting process, and I can't say it enough. Your positive viewpoints of the school, your positive being ambassadors for the school. These young men listen. When they go to the barbershop, when they go out into the communities, and when you think they're not listening, they're listening. And so if they're hearing good things about these universities, especially HBCUs, because we have to battle so many negative connotations that just aren't true. When they hear that you can be successful going to an HBCU, that you can, go get a great degree and make good money and have a great experience, then that's something that I think that, we all kind of subconsciously want to be around our own. I think that's just, naturally human instinct to want to be around people that look like you, speak like you, come from the same place you come from. And so, we have those opportunities sometimes with these young men. I think we've done a better job in the last few years since we've been here of winning some of those battles, whereas in the past, we weren't out as much. There was a lot of negativity around the program, and so we weren't really getting those type of young men into the program. But now I do commend Rattler Nation for continuing to help us in our recruiting efforts, because that's what's going to keep propelling us over the top and allow us to beat some of these PWIs that in the past have really stolen some of our really good players who would have been probably great players at Florida A&M.
Right, indeed. Another defensive back, 3-star back, highly rated. Hero Sports ranked him as number 23 overall. That would be Jalil Core, defensive back, 5'11", 195, from Armwood High School. He's from Seffner, Florida. 3-star guy, 3-year starter at Armwood. Armwood has a great tradition constantly in the state, whether it be the state semifinals or finals. I believe his team went to the finals 17 and 18 as a sophomore and a junior. Last year, or his senior year, they only got to the semifinals. Here's a young man. It's good to hear that we beat out Florida State, South Florida, Florida Atlantic, in-state for Jalil. Tell us a little bit about Jalil Core.
Well, again, I think the one reoccurring theme that you'll see with our class, really the last 3 years since we've been here, is the high schools that they attended. These guys come from winning programs, and I'm a firm believer that if you want to have a winning college program, you might want to recruit a bunch of guys that come from successful high school programs, because the formula for winning doesn't change whether you're in high school, college, or pro. It's the same concept. So Onwuzo, another powerhouse program, same as Chaminade, Madonna, and some of the other schools that we recruited guys from. And, he was a young man, kind of similar situation to Ben, had a lot of interest early on. He was one who early in the process, grades weren't the strongest. And so, a lot of schools may have kind of shied away in the recruiting process a little bit, not knowing if he was going to, get the necessary score. But he did. And so he ended up getting a really good test score, one that's going to get him in school and allow him to be a qualifier. And same thing. So a lot of schools backed off, didn't think he was going to qualify. All of a sudden he qualifies. And it's like, oh, well, FAMU's been there the whole time. And, I think this helped a lot, too. His cousin plays basketball for us. Nasir Cole, who's a senior who just exhausted his eligibility in basketball. He's his first cousin. And so Jalil actually came on this visit. His mom didn't make the trip. He actually came up with Nasir's mom. And so just being here, knowing the experience that his cousin had, graduating here pretty soon, actually going to go to grad school here, really had a great experience here at Florida A&M. I think that really, put us over the top. And again, it goes back to that same thing I just talked about, where we can show these guys firsthand experience of young, African-American men, minorities being successful here at Florida A&M, then that helps us in the recruiting process, because, they don't fall for the lies and the deception that some of our competitors put out, that they won't have that experience. And so the fact that he saw firsthand his cousin come here and be extremely successful as a student athlete, made Jalil want to come be a part of it as well. And he's another guy that we're very excited about. And, we feel like we got a lot of steals, a lot of gems in this class, and he's definitely one of those guys.
Another defensive back, another three-star back, comes out of Orlando, Florida, Dr. Phillips High School, another program that's continues to have they've continually had great success. Tevin Griffey, I almost called him Trey, because I remember that's his brother, but Tevin Griffey, defensive back, 5'11", 175. He has a brother, Trey, that went to Arizona, but more importantly, probably for a lot of people, he has a father who's a Hall of Famer that played in the major leagues by the name of Ken. Actually, a grandfather that was also a Hall of Famer. So as you're recruiting, and I saw the Instagram and the pictures when Tevin came to FAMU, what's the recruiting pitch like to Ken Griffey Jr., a Hall of Famer? What kind of things are you talking to him about? What kind of questions is he asking you about your program in FAMU?
Well, the interesting part about Tevin, and not to take too much time up talking about one guy, but, this is my first experience recruiting the son of a Hall of Famer, and especially a Hall of Fame baseball player, a guy that I grew up idolizing. And so we all have a perception of who Ken Griffey Jr. is, from what we saw as a player, real kind of laid-back guy, wasn't ever really in the spotlight. We heard about him driving a Honda Civic and all these things that we heard about Ken. And so I was kind of nervous to see how he would be. How, do you treat him like a normal parent? How much do you engage him? Do you not, not to ostracize the other parents on the trip, because it's, 12 other families,
right.
with Ken Griffey Jr., do you not, make sure you spend enough time with him so he doesn't feel neglected? So, playing that psychological mind game with myself during that weekend was probably something that I remember for a long time. But I tell you what, man, the first interaction with Ken, he's the most down-to-earth guy you ever want to meet. He's a true, former athlete's dad. Hey, coach, I'm not going to try to tell you how to coach my son. You coach him hard. You don't have to worry about me calling. I mean, he really put my mind at ease about a lot of things, thinking, again, a Hall of Famer. This is a guy who, a first ballot Hall of Famer. I mean, it's not 100% of the vote Hall of Famer. So you just don't know what you're going to get. But he really eased a lot of my anxiety about the recruiting process. I was very confident recruiting Tevin. Tevin's a phenomenal young man. You would never know that he's Ken Griffey Jr.'s son talking to him. He's just not that type of guy. He's just an unassuming kid, and just wants to come and play some good football. So it really made us put all of us at ease. When he came up on his visit, he just wants to be a part of a good program. Ken just wanted to know that what's my vision for the program? Same questions that a lot of parents ask. He didn't ask anything outlandish that other parents didn't ask. What's my vision for the program? What do I need? What type of things where do we see ourselves in 3, 4, 5 years? How long do I plan to be here? All those same questions that every parent asks. And, so it was a really good experience recruiting Tevin. And, I think the funny thing was when we started putting out the signees, once they started signing and we started releasing those photos, our SID mistakenly put Tevin Griffey down. So he had to call me and say, hey, Coach, they put Trey. I said, oh, my God. So I immediately called Howard and said, fix that immediately. It's Tevin. So, that was a funny little thing. But same thing. He understands. He knows, he's the son of a Hall of Famer. And, but again, great kid, not a showboat, not a guy that's, going to try to take spotlight because of who he is. He's just a guy that wants to come here and graduate and play good football. And, we're looking forward to him doing that. Coming from Dr. Phillips, a program that's won state championships, knows how to win, knows what a great program looks like. And we think he'll continue to push the envelope forward and FAMU becoming a perennial champion.
Right. It's real interesting of the 4 DBs, the programs that they came out of. I think that is a theme there that I think really stands out to me, as you noted. Well-known programs, but more importantly, programs where there's a winning culture and guys who have had to play under high expectations. So I think that's one of those intangibles that is really interesting. The second group that I think was also highly recruited or highly thought of when it all came out was the offensive line group. You don't always hear that, but you had, obviously we talked about Orlando Heggs, but then you also had 4 other guys. 3 of them were rated as at least 3 stars by the group, whether it be 24/7 Sports, Rivals, or ESPN. So I want to go through just some of those guys. We'll start with Evan Webster, 6'4", 293 from Wauchula, Florida. Went to Hardy High School, 3-year offensive tackle. Plenty of schools were after him. Some HBCUs as well: Alcorn State, Bethune, South Florida, Florida State. The list goes on. Even beat out UCF. So he was well thought of not only within the state, but overall. I think he was listed as number 26 overall by Hero Sports in terms of individual rankings. As it relates to Evan Webster, what is it that you and Coach Jackson saw from him that you liked most?
Well, the unique thing, the position that we're in, being here in the state of Florida, there are only 2 FCS programs here in the entire state. There are 3 Power 5 programs, 4 Group of 5 schools, and then, the 2 FCS programs. So Evan was a young man that was committed to South Florida the entire time. He was committed to South Florida up until the middle of January. Obviously, there was a coaching change at South Florida. Jeff Scott, my old college teammate Jeff Scott, replaced Charlie Strong. And so what happens with those situations, same thing happened at FAU. Coaches come in, they obviously evaluate the recruiting class that's already been put together, and then they make some decisions about whether they want to honor those scholarship commitments or not. Well, Evan was kind of one of those guys that fell through the cracks. Obviously, Jeff Scott felt they wanted to go in a different direction, with the offensive line in that class. And so Evan was a guy who had been committed to a Group of 5 school the entire football season, who now finds himself looking for a place to go with a week left in the recruiting process, which is a scary thing for anybody. If you can imagine, feeling like your recruitment's been done for months and months. And so the moment, his recruitment opened back up, I had a couple of individuals that I know, reach out to me. Again, he's in Wauchula, which is Bowling Green, Florida. I didn't even know there was a Bowling Green, Florida. So wow, okay. He's kind of in the middle of nowhere, so to speak, kind of in between Tampa and Orlando, south of Polk County. It's no easy way to get there, So immediately, when you have that type of situation, I knew that the Bethunes, the Alcorns, all of the schools at our level who are just waiting for an opportunity like that to pounce on this guy. So the moment I got called, I called Coach Jackson, called Coach Spady, who recruits that area, and said, we have to get to Wauchula County. I don't know where it is. I don't know who the coach is, but we got to get there. And Coach Spady, bless his heart, he and Coach Lemke were headed to Tampa. They jumped in the car, en route to Tampa, made a beeline to Hardy County, did the in-home visit with them, and sold them. They came up on the visit that weekend, and the kid, his mom and it makes you feel good. The mom called after he committed and just said he's never been this excited. I just see him smiling all the time. He's happy. He really feels like this is home for him, and it doesn't hurt that he's got Rattlers in the family as well. So a lot of times, it's one of those deals, kind of like my godmother was with me. She wanted me to go to FAMU so bad. I had all the larger programs, but the moment I told her I was coming back, everyone gets so excited because they want to see those guys, come to FAMU. So he's the reoccurring thing. He's a steal. He's a guy that years past would be playing at a Group of 5 school, and he's 6'4", he's 300 pounds, he's athletic, he's strong. You watch his film, he's a very, very good football player, and I'm just Coach Jackson's the happiest guy in the world right now because he's got 4 or 5 offensive linemen coming in that at this level we really don't coach unless we get lucky with a Calvin Ashley or Keenan Forbes type guy, but not out of high school. All of these guys are high school signees. And that's really the unique part, that we've been able to sign three-star offensive linemen in one football class out of high school.
Yeah, no, definitely. Another one of those guys, another 3-star, 6'4" offensive lineman, 307 pounds, as it's listed, Kendarius Cunningham from St. Petersburg, Florida, Gibbs High School. Let's see, he was a 2-year captain, chose FAMU over Florida, FAU, and Toledo. I think that's got to be pretty impressive or pretty important intangible, somebody who was a 2-year captain, especially on the offensive line. Would you say?
Oh, no question about it. Kendarius is one of the he may be the only signee in this class who actually attended our prospect camp this past summer. And so Kendarius came up last summer and won offensive lineman of the camp, did a great job for us, really built a great rapport with Coach Jackson during that one-day session. And he was our longest commitment. He committed to us after homecoming. He came up for homecoming, had a phenomenal time, gave us a verbal commitment. And to his credit, he stuck with that commitment. He had guys coming in, other schools coming in late in the process in late January trying to flip him. But he was solid. He didn't budge. He was locked in to be a Rattler and stuck with it. And that says a lot because, of course, whenever you have the enticement of some of those Group of 5 schools, a lot of times guys just choose it just because it's quote unquote FBS. They all say Division I, but they mean Division I FBS. And so he didn't do that. He stuck with FAMU, feeling like this was the place he needed to be. He's comfortable with us as a coaching staff. He's comfortable with the university and what it can provide. And that's the thing that we saw in this year's recruiting class, that there are a lot of guys who just want to be at a place where they feel at home. They feel they'll be coached by guys that genuinely care about them in a family environment where they can flourish. And we've sold, the fact that FAMU can provide those things. And that's why we were able to hold on to a guy like Kendarius Cunningham, who a lot of people wanted at the very end, but stuck to his guns and stuck with the Rattlers.
I'm curious, when those guys have schools that are contacting them and even after he's made the commitment, do you get calls from the guys that are like, hey, Coach, I want to tell you, so-and-so called me and they tried to offer me a scholarship, but I'm let you know I'm 100% committed to still being a Rattler. Do you hear those calls or get those messages from guys?
Well, it's one of those things. You're in that dilemma. Do I make them a mountain of a molehill? Those analogies. I don't even like to bring it up. You know what I mean?
Okay, right.
If they don't bring it up, I don't bring it up. I hear the rumors. Of course, 247 Sport Rivals, those recruiting services. They like to announce the new offers that guys got, and guys will even, the one thing that Kendarius did do, he did post one time that he, excited to get an offer from University X, Y, and Z. And so I reached out and I said, hey, everything's good. He was like, Coach, we're solid. I just posted it, but I'm coming to FAMU. So he kind of put my mind at ease that first time that, hey, I'm just playing the game. It's the one time I get to get recruited. Kids like to promote, sell the fact they got another offer, but he assured us from the get-go that he was 100% locked in. And when they give me that, I take their word for it. And, every now and then you might get a kid flip. But did you try to create that culture, that environment where, hey, I'm going to be honest with you guys up front. If we choose to go in another direction in the recruiting process, we're going to tell you. If you decide to go in another direction in the recruiting process, make sure you tell us, because I'm trying to raise men at the end of the day.
Sir.
And I make sure I tell the parents that from the get-go. Don't go on another visit without telling me. Don't say you're committed to me, and then I find out on signing day that you're going somewhere else. It's not that serious. Let's be men. Let's raise men to be men of character, up front, honest about the process. I want what's best for each young man. If they come to FAMU, great. If they don't, hey, you get to go to college, do what you love to do, and follow your dreams. I'm going to support that, even if it's not FAMU. Just be honest about it and upfront about it, and we'll do the same. And that's the only thing I try to do, and make sure the parents understand, so that we don't run into that situation where a guy's having to hide the fact that he's getting offers from other places and may entertain that. So that, luckily for us, Kendarius was a man of his word, assured us that he was coming here, and he stuck to that.
And I want to make sure I'm saying this name right. This next young man, is it Delonus Kabir?
Yeah, Delonus.
Okay. Delonus Kabir, another 6'3", 300-pound offensive lineman from Pahokee High School, 3-star rated by 24/7 and ESPN, was a 2019 Palm Beach Post first-team player, selected FAMU over UCF and Southern Miss. Now from, out of Belgrade, Florida. And now for me, when I always hear Pahokee, I always go back to the old stories or the video stories that they used to do about the Pahokee guys chasing rabbits in the sugarcane fields. I don't know if that still is happening, but I'm like, oh, we got a guy from Pahokee, and I'm like, that's all I'm thinking of is this big 6'4" guy chasing rabbits. Correct me or tell me what's your thoughts on Delonus, and are they still chasing rabbits at Pahokee High School? I don't.
Well, that's a muck thing. Of course, everyone who's from that area knows what the muck is. It's Pahokee, Belgrade, that part of Palm Beach, where the soil is really, soft and call it mucky. And so yeah, they still do chase the rabbits down there. Probably not as prevalent as it was back, when they did the documentary. But the thing with Delonus is that he's another guy, was committed to Central Florida for a while. Just didn't feel the love in the recruiting process that he wanted. And Brian Crawford, who's our starting center, with the Pahokee, and he had a personal relationship with Delonus, and his dad is in the school system down there. So again, just knowing about Crawford, knowing about FAMU from Crawford's dad, he reached out, and he actually reached out to us and said, showed that he was interested. And obviously, whenever you have a chance to get a young man with that size, and not that we look at rankings and stars, but again, when you got a chance to get a 3-star guy that passes the eye test, again, we couldn't turn that down. So, he's another young guy that's really excited about being at FAMU. And that's one of the things in the recruit process that we really make sure we do first. Let's recruit guys who want to be here, who want to be at FAMU, so that when they get here, they're not complaining about X, Y, and Z, and you don't have this, you don't have that. No, let's come here. Let's see everything that we do have. Let's see the things that we don't. I'm going to work to get those things, but be happy with where you are. And Delonus is a guy that, ever since he committed to us, he probably texts or reaches out more than any other signees, just to say what's up or retweeting things that we post. And, so I think he's going to be a guy that's going to come in and be one of our biggest recruiters as well, because I think he just really loves this process and loves the fact that he's coming to FAMU to be a Rattler.
Nice. Love to hear that. The fifth offensive lineman of the group is actually a guy from your backyard right there in Tallahassee, Florida. Michael Brown, 6'2", 250 from Godby High School, a 2-year starter, helped Godby to back-to-back playoffs, also a member of the track and field team, weightlifting team. Now it's listed here graded out at 83% with 113 pancakes as a starter. For those who aren't familiar with grades as it relates to offensive linemen, explain a little bit what that 83% means with 113 pancakes.
Well, the part that's impressive is 113 pancakes. Pancake obviously is whenever you as an offensive lineman put a defensive player on the ground. That's a pancake. So you think they played 12 games this year, I believe. So that's about 10 a game, roughly 9.5 a game. So, he's obviously a very tenacious offensive lineman, and that's what we look for. He's a little bit on the light side. He's about 260 right now. Obviously going to put on weight once he gets to college, but very tough, very athletic, and, a guy that can play really all three positions. We're primarily going to recruit him as a center and start him out at center, but he played guard and tackle in high school as well. So we look at that. The grades, coaches grade their offensive linemen. Well, really every player gets graded, but offensive linemen typically get graded on assignment and technique, and then, their effort. So some coaches are a lot more sticklers to detail than others. So an 83% grade for an offensive lineman is really good depending on who you ask, and pretty good depending on who you ask. You do have some lineman coaches who will give grades upwards to 90. You'll see a guy grade out at 91, 92. But if you're a strict grader and you grade a guy 83%, that's pretty special. To put it in context, I don't think we had a lineman this year grade 83% once during the season.
Wow.
Keenan Forbes was first team all conference and Boxer All-American, and I think his highest grade might have been 81 in a game.
Okay.
And so, Coach Jackson's one of those guys that really is a stickler for his grade as far as their technique in the position. So, he's a guy that we think he's the lowest rated guy of all four, but actually one of the guys we're most excited about because of his versatility, because of the fact that he's a local guy. We know what type of program Godby has. We got more guys on our team from Godby than any other school in the state of Florida. And so we know what type of player we're going to get from Godby, and he's the next in that pipeline of just tough, hard-nosed, tenacious guys, who have a passion for doing it on and off the football field.
The second, one of the second largest classes or groups of players that was recruited was the defensive line group. 4 players, actually among the interior, and I always like to believe you, and I've heard enough coaches say this, you win games in the interior, on the inside out. And so you have a total of 9 of the 18 recruits from your offensive line and defensive line group. There are 4 guys we already mentioned. We've already mentioned Donald Hall as one of those 4 defensive linemen. But then we've also got a 3-star rated defensive lineman, Gentle Hunt. I love that name, by the way, Gentle Hunt. I mean, it's almost like an oxymoron, isn't it? 5'10", from Gainesville, Florida, Gainesville High School. Chose FAMU over USF, Middle Tennessee, Coastal Carolina, Tulane. Was a Gainesville Sun all-area first-team selection in 2018 and was named to the Gainesville Sun all-area Super 11 in 2019. Was second team as a sophomore in 2017. So sounds like there's a pedigree. This young man just getting better and better every year. Tell us about Gentle Hunt.
Well, the one thing I want everyone, don't let the 5'10" fool you. One, he's not 5'10", he's taller than that. He's
okay.
Right under 6 feet. And he's eye to eye with me, if not a little bit taller. So I think that was a size from probably a sophomore year that just never got updated. But he's not,
okay.
He's not a sawed-off guy. And when you watch his film, he's not gentle on film. He is in person. He's a guy that very, very mannerable young man. A guy that had a lot of offers. Gentle's a guy that probably had 20 or so offers going into his into the recruiting process in January. And, just for one reason or another, a lot of the bigger, group of 5 offers, didn't pan out. And so it came down to the wire. He was actually the last guy that we signed, our last signing in the class. We were really excited about him, but also really worried about him because, there were a lot of suitors there near the end. And, I think the one thing that helped us, the fact that, excuse me, his mom is an alum, and his 2 other sisters are alum.
There we go.
I mean, both sisters came here, are pharmacists, and Gentle's the one guy who's kind of the poster child for what we as coaches, and especially here at HBCUs, kind of go through. Gentle in the process, he committed to us, then he decommitted, committed to a PWI, and so when I called and talked to him, he just was talking about some of the things that coaches coaches and kind of people that, close to him, not family-wise, but other people were coming to say to him, telling them that, you couldn't get a good education at FAMU, or you can't go to the NFL, the scouts aren't coming to FAMU, and all these things. And so I'm sitting there scratching my head. This is late. This is probably at 8 o'clock at night on a Monday night, right before signing day, or Sunday night, whatever it was. But he's telling me these things, and so I'm sitting there and I'm like, Gentle, let me get this straight. So you have a mother who graduated from this place who's doing very well in life. You have two sisters who graduated from here who are both pharmacists.
Right.
So they're doing really well from this place. And someone can come and tell you that we're not a good school. So, and that's what, so you can't go to the NFL because of scouts. So I came to my office, and so I started reading off names. And I read off about 15 or so names. I said, you want to know what those names are? I said, those are NFL scouts whose business card is sitting right here on my desk that just came here this football season. So over half the teams in the NFL came here at FAMU to scout our players. But you got people telling you that scouts don't come here. I'm like, so it's just, it's unfortunate that we have to battle these stigmas and these myths and these, fallacies that people tell about us HBCUs that just aren't true. And so, after that conversation, in front of his dad was sitting there listening. His dad didn't say anything the whole time. I didn't know he was listening. And his dad's a Bethune grad. So it's like you got a Bethune grad as a dad, you got a Rattler grad as a mom, but you got these coaches or whoever telling you that, HBCUs aren't good schools. It's like I just don't see how, people feel comfortable doing that. And so, unfortunately, that was, once and I said, just don't take my word for it. Just go do your research. Just pull up, U.S. News and World Report's rankings of all the schools you're considering academically and see where FAMU ranks as far as the business school, what you want to major in. And so then that's, so after doing that, it kind of put his mind at ease, and he's a guy that ended up coming to us. But, it just, and I tell that story just because I want people to understand the battles, the challenges that we face in the recruiting process with all this negative information that's put out there about our HBCUs, which just frankly aren't true. But we're very excited about Jensen. We think he's going to be a big-time player for us.
Yeah, no, it's just so interesting that you hear all kinds of things, and probably what you just shared is probably the mild version of the stuff that you battle against. So I'm you hear stuff that's out there, and just, it's public. Even among the big schools in the Big Ten or ACC, SEC, they run each other through the mud left and right. So I think speaking truth and honesty always ends up, and fortunately for that young man, he's got great examples, it sounds like, in his own family to sort of debunk a lot of those myths. Malcolm Moultrie from out of Pensacola, Florida, Booker T. Washington defensive lineman, 6'1", 300 pounds. He played, now, according to what I'm reading here, he spent his junior and senior year playing football, but he also comes with a basketball background where he played basketball his it looks like his first 2 years in high school, was an MVP caliber player as a junior, so I'm sure he had to make a decision, but he sounds like a very athletic player person just overall. What's your thoughts on Malcolm, and what's sort of the background on the transition from basketball to football for him?
Well, the thing about Malcolm, one of the things that we do in the recruiting process, we ask area coaches a lot about guys. So we'll go into a school, we'll talk to their head coach, he'll recommend this particular player. So when we go to other schools in the area, we'll ask them, what do you think about player X, Y, and Z? And so their recommendation means a lot to us, because typically coaches are going to be honest about who they feel are really good players that they went up against. Well, Malcolm's the guy that, when I start reaching out to coaches in Panama City, coaches in Pensacola, just really trying to gauge who's available, who do they like, his name kept coming up. And people kept saying, hey, have you seen number 55 at Pensacola, Booker T. Washington High School? And so after hearing that 3 or 4 times, you're like, I may need to take a look at this guy and see what all the hoopla is about. And the moment we turned the film on, you saw it. You saw it immediately. And Malcolm's a very athletic guy for his size. He's a 300-pounder, but very flexible. Plays with a great motor. And they've really turned that program around at Booker T. Washington High School. And so he's a young man, I think, that has a very, very high ceiling. in the game. Like you said, hadn't been playing the game very long and has a lot of upside. And so, we wanted to beef up the interior defensive line with our numbers, and we were fortunate enough to be able to sign 4, 300-pound guys that are all really good football players that we think will really, take our defense to the next level. But, Malcolm, like I said, doesn't have the rankings of a Gentle Hunt and some of those other guys, but film is equally as impressive, and we're excited to see what he can do once he steps foot on campus.
The last member of the defensive line group that we signed, Christof Troupe, from right out of Tallahassee, Godby High School, of course. So, we've already talked about the connections there with Godby and Christof. Let's see. What was it? Was selected to the 2024 to Georgia West of the Border All-Star Game, also a member of the track and field team. Tell us about Christof Troupe.
Well, Christof's one of those guys that, we every now and then or every year we have a young man, especially locally, where they're just entrenched in FAMU. The whole family went to school here, and, the community is all Rattlers. And Christof's that guy for us this year. His mom told me months ago that Christof's going to FAMU whether you recruit him or not. So it's kind of like my wife. My wife's grandmother told her, well, you can go anywhere you want to, but my money's going to FAMU. So if you want to follow the money, you want to go to FAMU. So Christof's kind of the same way. He's a young man that, Godby's had a pipeline of defensive linemen interior-wise the last 4 years. And, he was kind of the one that they were pubbing to be the next one. They've had guys go on Power 5 schools, Group of 5 schools. We signed one here a couple of years ago. And he was just the next line in a list of guys that have been really good on the interior defensive line there. So, we recruited him, and, he, again, not really ranked very high as far as his star rating, but really has a lot of intangibles that we look for. So, again, I think Christof's the guy that is going to come in and vie for immediate playing time, like a lot of those guys, and but good size, good strength, good athleticism, plays with a good motor, and again, I believe it's better football ahead of him.
The one linebacker out of this recruiting class that you recruited, Channing Ratcliffe-Campbell from Tampa, Florida, went to Armwood High School, a teammate of Jalil Core's. He was a member, he was a Tampa Bay Times All-Hillsborough County second team. Of course, Armwood went to the state semifinals in high school in this past fall, and 90 total tackles, 19 tackles for loss, 12 sacks as a senior. How does it, in terms of your line, it sounds like when you only recruit, well, first off, I guess tell me about Channing, but then my next question has to do about the numbers in terms of the number of linebackers versus defensive linemen and DBs that you bring in. So I guess let's start with, tell me a little bit about Channing.
Well, yeah, so to answer both questions, linebacker, much like running back for us, was that one position where we said, if we don't sign one this year, we're okay, because we felt we had enough depth at that position returning. We also felt we had bigger needs at other positions. And so when we started looking at our numbers, we said, well, we don't necessarily need a linebacker, but if we find one that we absolutely love, we're going to look at him. And Channing checked that box. He was a guy that we absolutely loved on film. My defensive coordinator's high school coach, his son is a defensive coordinator at Armwood. And so he reached out to us and told us about Channing and Jalil, and both raved about how good they were. Armwood's a powerhouse program, and whenever you have two guys who lead Armwood, if you lead Armwood High School in tackles and interceptions, you're probably a pretty good football player, because they got some Power 5 guys. One of their players, I think, is going to Georgia, one of those type things. So Channing was just a guy that stood out on film, playing beside a bunch of Power 5 football players. And so, and it also helps that his dad played football here, and kind of the same thing. So his dad wanted to, ensured us early on that, hey, I want Channing at FAMU, and trying to work it out where he maybe can wear his dad's number, but, but yeah, so it worked out, it made sense to us. Again, it wasn't a position of need, but we found a player that we were really excited about. And, we feel like he's going to be a great addition to us. And but that's kind of how Channing's situation came about, and that's why we only signed one, because we said if we didn't sign one at all, we'd be okay. But we found that one that we really, really love, and we're excited to give him here.
And, speaking of that one, as much as you love that one linebacker, I can only imagine you found that one running back in Mr. Trevin Smith out of Blountstown, Florida, Blountstown High School, 5'11", 178. And for anybody who does not know, he was the 2019 Florida Dairy Farmers Class 1A Player of the Year, rushed for 1,950 yards and 22 touchdowns. Also caught 10 receiving touchdowns, 4 kick return touchdowns, and 2 defensive scores. My goodness. I mean, I can't even do the math on how many touchdowns that is total. But I think the number that is most impressive, and when I saw the video of this, I became a big-time fan, probably like every FAMU alum who saw this tweet and saw the numbers that he put up in a state championship game. We were all tagging FAMU football, FAMU athletics, you, and anybody else on the staff. It's like, hey, is this guy coming to FAMU? Because he ran for 365 yards and 5 touchdowns, which were single-game rushing records in a state championship game. Tell us about Trevin Smith. And was your inbox loaded up with mentions on that particular night?
Well, it definitely was. And, Trevin's a young man from Blountstown, Florida, small town, just, west of us. And, a lot of traffic that goes through Blountstown. But, my wife's dad from Blountstown still lives there now. And we just kept hearing about this running back in Blountstown. Everyone kept saying, hey, you need to check out this running back. You need to check out this running back. Ever since he was really a sophomore or junior. And so once he became a senior and just really started ripping off big games, people really started noticing Trevin. And kind of similar situation to some of the other guys. When you looked at his initial transcript from his junior year, it didn't look promising, so to speak. A lot of schools are raising their academic standards as far as initial eligibility. And so, certain schools didn't think that he would not necessarily qualify, because he will, but maybe meet those benchmarks to get, automatic admission into school. And so, but he really buckled down. And one thing I can say about Trevin is he really buckled down his senior year, has really placed a heavy emphasis on his schoolwork, of hitting the books, getting good grades. And again, I mean, the stats speak for themselves. The record that he broke, it only belonged to Derrick Henry.
Oh, right, yeah. I've heard that guy.
Yeah. You might have heard of Derrick Henry. He's just ripping through the NFL now for leading the NFL in rushing this year. But to break his record in Tallahassee, that's what probably made it a little more sweet. He broke the record in Tallahassee. They played the state championship game here at Cox Stadium. But just dynamic young man. He's a guy that can run the ball out of the backfield, catch the ball, can run routes, can be dangerous in the return game. He's the one name of all the signees that the larger schools have reached out to me afterwards, or when I see them talk to them at places, that they say you got to steal, because he was the one that a lot of the bigger schools wanted, and when they found out they signed with FAM, they're kind of like, oh wow, he went to FAM. So it's like, he's just that one. He's just that guy. Very, very. I mean, of all the guys film, he is probably the most impressive, just because of what he can do with the football. But whenever you can get a Player of the Year, regardless of classification, he's a 1A Player of the Year. But when you're the best football player in the state of Florida in a particular class, it says a lot about you. And he beat out some really good players. And he ran for that 365 against Madison County. He didn't do it against chopped liver. They lost the games in Madison, but if you can put up those type of numbers against Madison County, you're doing something pretty special. So, we're excited to see what he can do once he gets to the Hill, because we think he's going to be probably the most dynamic guy on our team once he steps foot on campus.
The last couple of players are wide receivers, and as mentioned, we only had a couple of really a total of 3 offensive skill position players recruited in total. And so of the 2 wide receivers, we've got Aquil Muhammad, 6 foot from Decatur, Georgia, went to Southwest DeKalb High School, a well-known school up there in Atlanta, or the Atlanta area, Decatur. Well-respected, well-known. He was the 2019 Atlanta Journal-Constitution All-Metro DeKalb County team. They went back-to-back regional championships, did Southwest DeKalb, chose FAMU over Army, Georgia Southern, Kent State, in Eastern Kentucky. Rated as a 2-star from 24/7 and Rivals. What was it about Aquil that you liked and liked most, or what does he bring? What will he bring to FAMU?
Well, receivers kind of like running back and linebacker. You know, we were pretty loaded with skill guys, and that's why you saw a lot of emphasis placed on the offensive and defensive lines in this class. And so we really had to make some tough decisions because obviously in the state of Florida, the Southeast, there are a lot of really good skill guys. You know, you can find 6 foot, 5'11", 6'1" guys that probably run sub 4.5 from Pensacola all the way down to Miami. And so Aquil was a guy, one that we identified, you know, out of Southwest DeKalb. Their high school head coach is a good friend of mine and reached out. And, you know, this guy was committed to Toledo, you know, for a long period of time. But just did not want to. Maybe what you talked about, maybe looked at that forecast a few times throughout the weekend. Like, I don't want to go that far. You know, I really don't want to go that far. Really good relationship with his dad, and you know, I want to say convinced, but you know, got him to come down on the visit. You know, his the last weekend, and he had suitors from, like I said, schools that traditionally we wouldn't have beat out in the recruiting process. You know, but same thing. He got here. You know, his dad really, really felt comfortable with us when we sat down for our exit interview on that Sunday before they left. You know, that was the part I think that really sealed the deal. You know, once he was just able to really sit down and talk about what he wanted for his son and how we checked all those boxes for him. And so, you know, that was the thing about Aquil. Very talented young man, very fast, dynamic guy. You watch his film, he's returning kicks, returning punts, you know, catching balls. I mean, DeKalb kind of has really good football. And he's one of the best players in that greater Atlanta area. So, again, the guy that we feel like we got to steal on. If we go outside the state of Florida, you know, we definitely want to feel like he's a special guy because we don't have to really go outside the state very much. But Atlanta's always been good to us in the recruiting process, and he's another guy from the metro Atlanta area that we hope will come and follow the same pipeline as guys like, you know, David Manigo, who was one of our better receivers last year. You know, receivers we had in the past, you know, who come from that Atlanta area. You know, it's one of our largest alumni chapters. And so, you know, anytime we can, we want to try to get a good player out of greater Atlanta.
And the other receiver was actually from Florida, from out of Homestead, Florida, at South Dade High School. Trevon Sanders, 6 foot, 160, about the same height, but maybe a little bit smaller than Aquil. Trevon helped lead South Dade to back-to-back playoffs. Chose FAMU over UNLV, Southern Miss, FAU, Alabama A&M. Good group of schools that were after Trevon. What was it that you liked about Trevon?
Well, one is speed. You know, he can really, really run. And it sounds like a cliche. You know, he's from Miami, Homestead, South Florida. So you just assume everybody that comes from Miami can fly. And, you know, it happens to be true more times than not. But he's a guy that can really he's probably the fastest guy in our entire signing class. He'll come here and immediately be one of the fastest guys on this team. And, you know, Coach Jalil Core is our wide receivers coach. And he's from Miami. You know, he played high school ball down at Killian and recruits that area along with Coach Billy Roll. And, you know, has been watching Trevon for a long time. You know, he saw him as a junior. You know, he's been talking about him really since his junior year. And, you know, he was a guy that really was the only receiver that we really identified early on. You know, we were really only going to sign one. And I pretty much, you know, told Coach JB, if we sign one, who's the one you want? And it was Trevon, you know. And so we ended up, a spot came open, and we ended up taking Aquil as well. But Trevon was that one receiver that we had identified because of his speed. You know, we lost Marcus Williams to graduation, who was our fastest player, also from Miami. And we felt we needed a guy that can come in and kind of replace him as that true speed guy. And Trevon definitely fits that bill. So, you know, very excited about getting him here, you know, get him in, get him on the training table. He may get that 160 up to about 170 one day. But, you know, he's a guy that hopefully his speed will allow him to not get touched very often, being a kind of frail guy. But, again, just, you know, really adds to our team speed. You know, we're already a pretty fast football team, but whenever you can add a guy like Trevon, who's probably a sub 4.5, 4.4 type guy, you know, we really feel he'll bring an element to our offense that we lost, you know, with losing Marcus Williams to graduation.
Yeah, well, definitely. So, folks, that is the 2020. Are there any names that I missed? Anybody that may have come in afterwards that I missed? I feel like I went through pretty much everyone that was listed. Did I get everybody?
Yeah, for the most part, I think you got everybody. You went quarterback all the way down to safety. Yeah. So, I think it was 18 guys in this class that we signed. Yeah. Like you said, 3 that are already here working out. That'll start spring ball here Saturday. And then the other 15 will be coming in hopefully this summer to begin workouts before we start training camp in August. So very excited about the class. Again, I commend my coaching staff, the support staff, the hostesses, the everyone that took part in the official visit weekend. Whenever you can have a number 1 rated class, we don't really get much in the rankings, but it's good to be recognized for the job that you do. And, we're very excited to have this top rated class. And we hope that it pays huge dividends for us, sooner started rather than later. And but we feel like it just continues to elevate this program to the level that we all feel it can be, which is the destination place, for young men in the state of Florida and the southeastern region, and hopefully eventually, all across America because of what we do on the field, but also in the classroom and in the community.
Well said. Before I let you go, Coach, I just wanted to – you mentioned the start of spring practice coming up here. First practice is scheduled for Saturday, 29th of February. It's an afternoon practice. What I found interesting about the schedule, I don't know if this is something – I don't know if you did this last year, so I apologize, but you've got 15 practices, but you spread them out from basically over I'd say probably a 5-week period. From all the way until April 11th, you've got the Orange and Green Spring Game, which is on Saturday, March 28th at 2 p.m., but you've also got a couple of scrimmages that you will do the following 2 Saturdays. So I'm curious, is that something new in terms of spreading out the spring practices over that course of basically the month?
Yeah, I think so. Again, we started a little bit earlier than normal, I guess normally for us, starting in late February as opposed to mid-March, and which allows us to kind of stretch the spring practice out a little bit more. Spring is about development to me, so it gives us a chance to really, have a day where we practice, have a couple of days where we watch the film from practice, really make a lot of corrections, then maybe have a day where we just meet and walk through, that's not a countable day before we get back to, to practicing. So that along with the class schedules, making sure that we get all the guys out there, kind of put us on basically a Wednesday, Friday, Saturday practice regimen. Saturdays will be more reserved for scrimmage type situations. And but again, we got spring break sprinkled in the middle of it, which is another reason why I stressed out another week. So, had spring break not been during that time, it basically would have been stretched out over a 4-week period, which is the max allotment that the NCAA allows us, 34 days that the first day and last day have to be within. And but again, it keeps us on that slowed down pace. I've done the 4 days a week spring practice, and it's pretty grueling. You're trying to get through those 15 days in 3.5 weeks. I mean, that's a lot of wear and tear on these guys. They'll go through 5 months in August where they're practicing every day, meeting. You don't want to do that to them this part of the year too, getting them some time to kind of rest and recover. So we're going to be a little bit more slowed down as far as the times between practices, which will give us as coaches and players a lot more time to meet and really just kind of learn football, fundamental football. Going into year 3, that's our emphasis. Let's really become masters of our craft fundamentally. Let's really understand wholeheartedly what we're doing offensively, defensively, and in the kicking game as opposed to just knowing an offense and a defense. Let's try to know the whys. Let's perfect the techniques, and that's what we think the 15 days this spring will give us a chance to do. And that's why we start a little bit earlier, and we'll stretch it a little bit longer to maximize these 15 days.
Yeah, I was going to definitely commend you for that because it does feel like it's something different. It probably, it beats as you mentioned, the traditional 4 day a week over a 4-week period kind of thing that probably most people are expecting or thought they might see. And I know your guys will probably appreciate that because you'll probably get the most out of them, knowing that the next day you don't have to come right back the next day. Now about the scrimmages. So the Orange and Green game will be open to the public. and I'm sure more information will come out about that from FAMUathletics.com or the athletic department. But what about those scrimmages following? Will those be open event scrimmages? Do you anticipate those being open?
Yes, I do. All 3 scrimmages will be open, to the public. And, again, the Orange and Green game is kind of in conjunction with a lot of events going on campus that day. Be Out Day, put on by student government, which is always a huge part of our FAMU culture. Spring Preview is going on that day as well, which is a huge recruitment for the university for prospective high school students. There's a baseball game that afternoon. There's a softball game sometime around that afternoon, I think. So there'll be a lot of events going on campus that day, and the Orange and Green game will kind of be mixed, put right there in the middle of it. So, that's why we moved the Orange and Green game up to that particular date. But, again, it does allow us, because in the past, the quote-unquote spring game has kind of been the culmination of spring practices. It's kind of the end of it. For us, it's actually the first scrimmage. And so what will allow us to do after that is really get in depth as far as what we want to install, what we want to run, because typically at the spring game, you're going to get pretty watered down stuff because we're not trying to show too much. We don't know who's in the stands.
Right.
But these last 2 scrimmages will really give us a chance to really just open it up offensively and defensively, play a lot of snaps, a lot of guys, and really just get a good feel for what these guys can do on the football field. So we're going to try it this year, first time doing it this way. Again, I think change is always a little bit shaky to some people. You get a little nervous doing things differently, but I think there are a lot of benefits to what we're going to do this year, and obviously we'll see how it works for us, and maybe something we continue in the future. But, again, we're excited about spring ball starting on this Saturday, 15 practices. Wednesday, Friday, Saturday. If you want to get up at 6 a.m. and come out and watch this practice, you're more than welcome to in the stadium. Friday
before you go to work.
Before you go to work. Yeah, Friday afternoons will be 3:30, and then the Saturdays will be 2 o'clock. So, but anyone who wants to come out and check us out, feel free to do so. We're very excited, and we love to have our fans come out and support us.
Definitely. So just a reminder for everyone, make sure you guys are out there following the Rattlers on social media, and if you guys haven't been paying attention to the uptick in the social media coverage, all credit to Brian Howard and everyone over in the athletic department who are making those great strides. At FAMU Athletics on Twitter, at FAMU ATH on Facebook, at FAMU Athletics on Instagram. Make sure you check out the newly designed, if you haven't checked out the newly designed FAMUathletics.com website, you're missing out. Great stories constantly being put up, great information. It's all timely, well done. And also you can find Coach on Twitter. What's your handle? Give the folks your handle again, Coach.
Really, very simple. HC, as in head coach, HC Willie Simmons on Facebook. Well, no, I'm sorry, HC Willie Simmons on Twitter and Instagram. It's just Willie R. Simmons on Facebook, but HC, as in head coach, Willie Simmons.
Exactly. A must follow on Twitter, a great follow on Twitter. Coach, I appreciate you taking time to go over this class. I hope those of you, Rattler Nation specifically, who have taken time out to listen and watch on YouTube and you've seen the video of this recruiting class. This is fun. As an alum, as a football fan, I appreciate just the time to be able to talk with you, Coach, and just go over your class. Congratulations to you, the coaches, the staff, as you said, everyone who did a great job bringing in the next group of Rattlers into the family. And we begin the process getting ready for 2020 on Saturday.
I appreciate it. Anytime.
All right. Thank you, Coach. Take care. God bless. And I will see you down the road. All right.
Cuvée Group is a Florida-based marketing and training consulting firm. We help businesses communicate to their target audience and engage them in conversation. We also help to expand their audiences, which will ultimately result in growth for those organizations. In addition to being a certified constant contact specialist, my colleagues and I are also certified in John Maxwell Leadership Principles. We use these proven principles to conduct workshops, training, and private coaching sessions for individuals and companies looking to take things to the next level. Contact us to schedule a free consultation. Issues today, don't delay, call Cuvée.
It's like a loop machine.